Look at a map of the world for a moment. Australia has never been connected to Asia. Not now, and not at any point in the last several million years. During the ice ages, the sea dropped enormously. You could walk from Siberia to Alaska. You could walk from England to France. Britain stopped being an island. Japan was very nearly attached to the mainland. And still, between Asia and Australia, there was open water. Not a river, not a channel you can wade across at low tide. On the very best route, at the very best moment, you are looking at somewhere between 70 and 90 kilometers of open sea. And for part of that crossing, you cannot see where you are going. People were living in Australia at least 50,000 years ago, and quite probably 65,000. Which means that before that, a group of human beings got into something, pushed off a beach, and aimed at a horizon. We have never found the something. Not one plank, not one lashing, not one fragment of it. This video is about the strangest job in archaeology, proving that a voyage happened when the boat has been gone for 60,000 years. Start with a naturalist and some birds. In the 1850s, Alfred Russel Wallace was collecting specimens across the Indonesian islands. On Bali, he found woodpeckers, barbets, and pheasants, Asian birds. He sailed to Lombok, which is about 35 kilometers away, and found cockatoos and honeyeaters, Australian birds. Two islands close enough to see from one another, with completely different animals living on them. He drew a line on the map between them. We still call it the Wallace Line. What that line actually marks is a trench. The water there is deep, and it has never dried out. Here is why that matters. At the height of the last ice age, the sea was about 120 meters lower than it is today. Mainland Southeast Asia, Sumatra, Java, and Borneo all joined into a single continent. Geologists call it Sunda. Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania joined into another one called Sahul. You could have walked from Bangkok to Bali. You could have walked from Sydney to Port Moresby. But between Sunda and Sahul, the seafloor drops away by thousands of meters. No amount of ice age ever took that water away. So the islands in the middle, the ones we call Wallacea, were always islands. Every animal that has ever lived there arrived across water. Stegodons, which were relatives of elephants, swam. Elephants are surprisingly good swimmers. Rats and lizards rafted over on mats of vegetation torn out of river mouths by storms. Nothing walked. There was nothing to walk on. And a human being heading for Australia had to cross somewhere between 8 and 17 of those water gaps, depending on the route. There are two plausible routes, and both have been modeled in detail. A northern one, island hopping through Sulawesi and then down towards New Guinea. A southern one, running along the island chain to Timor and then jumping across to the Australian shelf. Shermona Keeley and Sue O'Connor's modeling favors the northern route, largely on what you can see from where. But on either route, there is at least one leg where the destination is below the horizon when you set out. Now the date. Madjedbebe is a rock shelter under a sandstone escarpment in Arnhem Land, in the Northern Territory of Australia. It sits on Mirarr country, and the excavation was carried out under an agreement with the Mirarr traditional owners. In 2017, a team led by Chris Clarkson published the results in Nature. Underneath the layers that everybody already agreed about, they hid a dense band of artifacts. Ground edge axes, which are among the oldest found anywhere in the world. Grinding stones with ochre and reflective mica still sitting on their surfaces. More than 10,000 stone artifacts in that lower band alone. Dating the sand grains by optically stimulated luminescence gave a figure of around 65,000 years. That is a very large claim, and it was attacked immediately. The objection is a good one. In loose sand, small heavy objects sink. Termites tunnel. Roots push through. People walk on a shelter floor for thousands of years. If those axes drifted downward from a younger layer, then the date belongs to the sand and not to the tools. Jim Allen and Jim O'Connell pressed that argument hard, and they're not cranks. Clarkson's team answered with the shape of the distribution. Objects that sink end up smeared through the sediment. These sat in tight horizontal bands. And flakes that refit onto each other, pieces struck from the same lump of stone, were found lying close together. Scattered debris does not reassemble itself after a 60,000-year swim through sand. Where it stands today, everyone accepts that people were in Australia by 50,000 years ago. 65,000 is well supported and not universally accepted. For our purposes, it does not actually matter which number you prefer. Both of them require a boat. And now it gets stranger. Flores is an island east of the Wallace line. It has never been joined to anything. At two sites there, Wallace and Madjedbebe, there are stone tools around 1 million years old. That is not our species. That is Homo erectus, or something descended from it. Later, on the same island, there is Homo floresiensis, a hominid about 1 meter tall, nicknamed the Hobbit. However it got there, its ancestors crossed open water to do it. On Sulawesi, at a site called Talapu, there are stone tools at least 118,000 years old. On Luzon, in the Philippines, a team led by Thomas Njiko excavated a butchered rhinoceros. 57 cut marks on the bones, stone tools lying beside it, and a date of 709,000 years. Luzon has never been connected to the mainland either. Nobody seriously argues that Homo erectus was building boats. So what is the explanation? Tsunamis. Island Southeast Asia is the most tsunami-battered region on the planet. The backwash from a large tsunami drags entire mats of vegetation out to sea, sometimes with animals riding on them. It is not an elegant answer. It needs enough individuals to survive the same accident to found a breeding population, which is a great deal to ask of a catastrophe. But the alternative is that a hominin with a brain 2/3 the size of ours was building seaworthy rafts 1 million years ago. That is a much larger claim, and there is nothing to support it except the fact that they arrived. The field has not settled this, and it is exactly why you should be careful with the sentence. Modern humans invented seafaring. What is different about Australia is direction and scale. The currents in that corridor do not deliver you to Australia by accident, and you cannot found a continent's population with one lucky raft. So what were they actually in? Here is the honest answer. Nobody knows, and nobody is going to find out from an excavation. The oldest boat ever found anywhere on Earth is the Pez canoe from the Netherlands. It is a hollowed pine log about 3 meters long, and it is roughly 10,000 years old. Australia was settled at least 40,000 years before that canoe was carved. In the wet tropics, wood is gone within decades. Bark goes faster. Plant fiber lashings go faster still. So the boats have to be reconstructed out of what would have worked and what people actually had. The favorite candidate has always been a bamboo raft. Bamboo grows all through island Southeast Asia. It is enormously buoyant and can be lashed together with no metal and no complicated joints. There is a problem with bamboo, though. It waterlogs. Test rafts lose buoyancy over a few days at sea, which is precisely the wrong way to fail on a long crossing. So between 2017 and 2019, a team led by Yusu Kefu decided to stop arguing and build the things. They made a reed bundle boat. They made a bamboo raft. They made a dugout canoe, hollowed out using replica stone-adzed. Then they tried to cross a real stretch of open ocean in them. The reed boat was too slow. The bamboo raft was too slow. Both of them lost to the Kuroshio, a current that runs at several kilometers an hour. The dugout worked. In 2019, 5 paddlers took a hollowed cedar log 225 kilometers from Taiwan to the island of Yonaguni. It took about 45 hours, including a full night on open water with no instruments and no modern navigation of any kind. They deliberately aimed well upstream of the target and let the current carry them down onto it, which is exactly what you would have to do. That experiment proves something narrow but real. The crossing is physically possible with Stone Age technology. But the boat is the easy part. Think about what a deliberate voyage actually requires. First, you have to believe there is something out there. Not know, believe. And you can, in fact, gather evidence for that from a beach. Clouds pile up and then sit still over land, in a way they never do over open water. Birds fly out to sea in the morning and come back in the evening on a bearing. And on a very clear day after rain, the mountains of an island below the horizon will lift into view for an hour and then sink again. Second, you need a craft that carries a payload. Not one person, a group. Because one arrival is a death, not a settlement. Corey Bradshaw's team modeled the founding of Sahul and concluded it took something like 1,000 people arriving in waves over centuries. That means many boats. It means going back for more. Third, water. Fresh water for 4 or 5 days is the heaviest thing on board, and there is none waiting for you until you find it. And fourth, you have to want to. No dating method in the world is ever going to touch that part. There is one more line of evidence. and it is the strongest of the lot, and it is not a boat. Obsidian, volcanic glass. It takes a brutally sharp edge, and every volcano produces chemically distinct glass, which means you can pick up a flake and say precisely which mountain it came out of. Obsidian from New Britain in the Bismarck Archipelago turns up at sites 350 kilometers away 20,000 years ago. That is not a crossing. That is a route run again and again. The same story appears in the Mediterranean. At Franchthai Cave in Greece, there is obsidian from the island of Melos in layers from around 11,000 BC. Before farming, before pottery, and Melos has always been an island. On Cyprus, people arrived and then went back for cargo. Cattle, goats, deer, and cats, all carried across in boats. At Shillero Cambos, a cat was buried beside a person 9,500 years ago. That cat came by sea. Sea travel is not a one-off stunt at the edge of prehistory. It is infrastructure. Here is the thing I keep coming back to. We have the date. We have the destination. We have the ground edge axes they were making when they arrived. What we do not have, and never will, is the morning. Somebody finishing a lashing. Somebody looking at the water and deciding that today is the day. Every other first in this series leaves an object behind. The flute survives. The bead survives. The grave survives. The first voyage left nothing at all, except the people standing on the other side afterwards. Australia is the artifact. The continent itself is the evidence. Which means the oldest thing we can prove about human ambition is not a tool. It is a decision to go somewhere you cannot see. Somebody made that decision 65,000 years ago with a paddle and a guess. Their descendants are still living there. It is the longest unbroken relationship between a people and a place anywhere on Earth.